Buyer's right to reject is pretty flexible. This is not that different from common law. Basically, you can accept or reject all or part of a shipment. That's pretty close to what the common law is. Again, a lot depends on how bad you need the stuff. So you may say, by golly, I'm going to have it exactly this way. Shows up 2 weeks late and you are desperate for it. You needed it 2 days ago. You're probably going to keep it even though you're mad about it. You may order the next batch from somebody else, but again, as a practical matter, it becomes difficult sometimes to say, well, gee, I've got the right to send this back. Sure you do, but you also have the right to not sell things that you were planning to incorporate that into or resell the items that you're accepting. So a lot of practicality has to be loaded on top of what is the literal word of the law. Now, timely notice of rejection. I have my favorite story on this. I work with a seafood wholesaler here in Houston. They buy lobsters, or were buying lobsters from a company that shipped Maine lobsters out of Boston. So they had a credit dispute, and they asked me to get involved. So it's like, well, the people in Boston say we owe them $5,000. I'm like, oh, okay. Why do you owe $5,000? Well, because we didn't pay them for all the lobsters they said they shipped to us. I said, keep talking. And they said, well, you see, the boxes come to the airport. The lobsters, as you all know, are shipped live. If we're talking whole lobsters, they're shipped live. It's a cardboard box with seaweed. They're shipped by air because they're not going to live that long out of the water, but a day or so before they get back in the water. So in any event, they said, we open the boxes when we get them to not at the airport. They open the boxes when they get them in a refrigerated truck to their wholesale terminal. We open the box, about every other box has a dead lobster in it. So we mark that, and then instead of sending them a check for $500, we send them a check for $490. Well, if you do that for a whole year, you end up owing the other side $5,000. And I'm like, so did anybody bother to call the lobster company and tell them why they were not getting full payment? No, we figured they'd figure that out when we short paid them almost every week. And I'm like, guys, this doesn't have to be that difficult. I said, didn't you ever hear taking your phone out, taking a picture of the box with the lobster on the bottom who's not moving? I think we could figure this out. We could provide data. We could be an interactive co-participant with the company we're doing. So what happened is that both sides went away mad. So the company in Boston refused to sell the guys in Houston any more lobsters, but did not try and file a lawsuit because it's very difficult to sue across state lines. And for the amount of money in controversy, my recollection was about $5,000. Frankly, you can't afford to sue interstate for $5,000. If it had been $50,000, I'm sure we would have seen a lawsuit. But the practical thing is, think about it. I'm not defending my guys. My guys had an obligation under the law, as this slide says, timely rejection. You open the box, got dead lobsters in it. You pick up the phone, you say, we got 2 dead lobsters. This is not complicated stuff. This is the easy stuff. Talk to the other side.
Is there not an ability, I'm thinking, in a contract or a relationship like that, there'd be an expectation of completion, that you're going to...
Well, I think that's a very good point, and that's probably why the people in Boston didn't push it further, because it is a situation where when you're dealing with live things, like live lobsters especially, it was so consistent over the year. In fairness to my client, it was so consistent over the year that I forget how many boxes were delivered at one time, but I think every time they got a delivery, there were 2 dead lobsters on average. So we might have 3 one week and 1 the next week, but it was very consistent, and it was across the whole year. And on the other side, one of the things that drives me crazy is, I do primarily employment law, but I do some general business. I do send collection letters for my clients, and one of the things is that they wait and wait and wait. Like the collection that we have going on in Oklahoma, they delivered the materials, 110,000 materials, they delivered that in December 2015. They brought it to me 2 months ago. I mean, it's like, no, you don't do that. It's, first of all, it's your, again, one of the things to think about is getting deposits. Is if you're delivering $110,000 worth of material, going to Oklahoma for installation in Canada, like to get that material back, yeah, not happening in this lifetime. Yeah, be smart, say, we'd like half up front. How bad is it? Yeah, it's a no patch. I think we'll get all up front, at least half. Probably won't make the sales, we'll get all up front. We'll do something, and then once you've got the deal in place, 30, 60, 90 days, it ought to be to your turn. And I'm not in the litigation business, so I'm not looking for business. I'm saying it. I'm saying, as a practical matter, if you're in business, number one, you got to sell stuff. That's what we're talking about here. Number two, you got to get paid. And part of getting paid is staying on top of your collections. And it is true. Number one is companies go out of business, they don't sell stuff. Number two is they don't collect stuff. And there have been some, I'm trying to think of one, I can't think of one right off, but there have been some colossal business failures where they sold plenty, but part of the reason they sold plenty is because they had really sloppy credit terms, and it brought them down because they made a lot of bad sales on time. So it cuts both ways. We have to be smart business people. We have to know what we're doing. Now, same wholesaler, different product, different buyer. Crab meat, commercial loaded crab meat. That's like a pallet of crab meat being sold to a further distributor. It's going to be boxed up. They're going to take the boxes off the pallet and deliver them to restaurants. So the wholesaler is really wholesale, like they sell by the pallet. Sub-wholesaler is going to deliver them by individual boxes of crab meat. Okay, so early summer they get a delivery of a pallet of crab meat from my same guys who bought the lobsters. So they don't get paid right away. They get no feedback for about a month. And then when they don't get paid, they say, hey, we didn't get paid. And they say, oh, well, we got bad food from you. And they say, oh, when were you going to tell us? See, it puts a shoe on the other foot. When were you going to tell us that you got bad crab meat? And bad, you think about it, seafood is very sensitive. Lobsters, crab meat, think of the things we're talking about. Perishability. Say, wait a minute, what did you do? Oh, well, we got it. And they said, we'll send the truck over to pick it up next week. So the truck goes over next week, crab meat's not there. Oh, well, we got rid of it. We were tired of waiting for you to come over. Sure. So the story develops that they sold some of the crab, and then they decided they weren't going to sell the rest. What do you think happened, remembering what time of year it was delivered?
So a few restaurants ended up with sick customers?
No, much better than that. Now, what happened is the pallet sat on their loading dock too long. This guy delivers. So our company delivers, my client delivers a pallet of crab meat. It's on the loading dock of the other client. The fresh crab meat comes off the top, goes, and it's fine, which meant that the pallet was most likely fine. They left it on the loading dock too long. It is very hot here in Houston, folks. Loading docks are not air conditioned. These products are stored at 0 degrees. These people in the middle of summer there are wearing winter clothes to drive a forklift, and these are big freezers. They drive forklifts in and out of these freezers. Yeah, that pallet got left on the dock, so some of the stuff was taken off quickly, was okay, but if it's left on the dock, it's gone. So that was another dispute. It didn't go to court, but it was a mess because it's like, well, what happens on both sides? But part of your responsibility, if you're rejecting an order, and especially if it's a perishable item, you have to reject immediately, and you have to keep it in a freezer until the other side comes to get it. So their argument was, well, you know, freezer spaces, which we agree with, freezer spaces are very valuable. How are you going to, balance that out? And I would probably, again, it was Houston to Houston, I would probably send a truck the same afternoon and say, let me see the stuff, I'm going to send a truck over and make a determination. Because you can usually look at it and see if it's been exposed to heat and stuff like that. But without knowing more, I knew that's what happened, it was left on the dock. So some of it was okay because it was shipped quickly, and the rest of it didn't get put away properly. And just tough life out there. Many things are considered accepted when they arrive. The crab meat example could be used as an example of acceptance, because that's what we said. And then later they came back and said, oh, well, we're bad. Well, the problem is, if you have a pallet of 30 or 40 identical boxes of crab meat, the likelihood that 2 are good and the rest are bad is not high. The likelihood that 2 are good and the rest were left sitting on the loading dock much higher. Yeah, especially something everybody knows. I mean, even if you're not in the seafood business, you know crab meat, you absolutely want it frozen on ice or eaten, you know. Not a lot else between. We talked about the term cover before. Cover pretty much applies the same under Uniform Commercial Code as it does under contract. We've talked about specific performance before in our contracts chapter. Basically, you know, the UCC comes down pretty much the same way. If the goods are unique, you don't give up the right to specific performance. You can insist on delivery of what you've got in. Right to cure, we see this much more under the code than we do under general contract terms. And this is where you're in business. You've got to deliver a certain item. So you go and buy it someplace else because you have to. But if you're buying on short notice, generally speaking, you're going to pay more money. And then that loss, that spread, is what you're going to sue for in terms of damages. Again, a lot of this stuff doesn't end up in lawsuits because it's not enough money. A good benchmark is $5,000 and under. If it's convenient, go to small claims court without an attorney. Unfortunately, that's the reality of business. Pretty much, even to walk across the street, just as a practical matter, you probably need about $10,000 in dispute locally. If it's an interstate dispute, many, many more thousands than that to justify it being involved. Now, this is one we mentioned a couple times. We're going to come back to this a couple times in the course. And that's if you deliver goods to an insolvent buyer. We define that as the buyer files for bankruptcy within 10 days. And you have the right to go in and get your goods back. Now, the practical problem with this is that all of the creditors want your stuff to stay there, be part of the liquidated estate. So don't expect an easy time down at the courthouse, even if your stuff, you can look through the window of the closed business and see it sitting there, it's still intact. You're still going to have an uphill fight to get that released. But, you know, certainly I'd be taking pictures of it saying, hey, see, Judge, it's really, really clearly there and all that. But you also are depending on blind luck that you delivered it close enough to when they file for bankruptcy that you can make the argument that the buyer was already insolvent. Okay, that's the cliche that they basically that they bought in bad faith because they knew when they bought it from you and you delivered it that they weren't going to have the money to pay. So that's the theory of taking it back, but it's not an easy theory to collect on. Certainly, you want to resell goods if people refuse to take them. This is a doctrine that we call mitigation of damages. We mentioned this in the contract provisions, and the same thing applies in the Uniform Commercial Code. It's expected that you will do what you have to. Now, keep in mind perishability. So you have things like crab meat, you have things like lobsters, you have things like tomatoes and bananas that have very short shelf lives. And you may have to take a really big discount in order to make any money off the products. And so, again, the law just needs you to act reasonably under the circumstances. But it's not always going to be an easy situation to achieve. Now, resale can be public or private. A lot depends on what you're dealing with. Many of you probably remember there was a long-running show on some unknown channel called Storage Wars, where people would buy the contents of mini warehouses and have big production numbers and all that. But the reality is that those are generally sold at auction for various legal reasons. But again, if you've got a pallet full of bananas that we need to be sold in 2 days, you take whatever you can get and get them out of there. So again, it's going to be relative to the items you're dealing with. Could even be some different stuff, like software. There's a new game that's been released, and it has to be sold at the time that advertising campaign is on for that product, a national advertising campaign. So you can make cases depending on the specific circumstances. But it's not fun, and it could be more expensive to sue for the damages than the damages to sustain. Now, how does this relate to global sales law? Note the difference. Buyers are required, under global sales law, required to inspect and to reject non-conforming goods. Notice must be given to the seller, I love this, within 2 years from the date of inspection. That's pretty fun.
Does that apply for bananas as well?
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, 2 years doesn't really help you out a lot there, folks. So, injured parties deprive the benefit of her bargain unless the loss of the bargain was unforeseeable to the breaching party. Breach order is not really the word as far as